Ladies and gentlemen, here's your second stimulus check, enhanced unemployment payment, and EIDL grant update for the evening of September 1st, 2020. In this video, I'm going to tell you what Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin just said this afternoon at a hearing before the House Special Subcommittee handling the virus. Chairman of the House Special Subcommittee handling the virus, Democrat Congressman from South Carolina, James Clyburn, first asked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, how can the Trump administration boast and brag that we are enjoying explosive economic growth, a V-shaped recovery, when there are a whopping 27 million people collecting unemployment insurance? Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said that no, that there are in fact 14.5 million on continuing unemployment insurance. According to the Labor Department, there are 27 million people collecting unemployment insurance under all state-sponsored programs. That could include the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Package, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, the Self-Employed Assistance Program, the Trade Readjustment Allowance Program, and all other programs that a state pays out to people on unemployment insurance. There are 14.5 million people that only receive the regular state unemployment insurance compensation payments, ladies and gentlemen. That said, then Congressman from Ohio, James Jordan, he came out and he started listing all the successes of the funding that the federal government paid out through the CARES Act, most specifically what the Treasury assisted in paying out through the Paycheck Protection Program loans, millions of Paycheck Protection Program loans amounting to billions of dollars in funding for small businesses, saving 85% of jobs at small businesses, about 50 million jobs that he wanted to also include in the record. Then Congresswoman Maxine Waters from California demanded that lawmakers, that everyone should be commended for the successes of the CARES Act because everyone worked together on it. Inclusively, Congresswoman Maxine Waters noted that she worked tirelessly with Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and Congresswoman from Brooklyn, Nydia Velasquez, in order to provide more funding to the community development funding institutions that provide funding to underserved communities, to women small business owners, to minority small business owners, and other small business owners that don't have broad access to capitals, as do bigger organizations. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin thanked Congresswoman Waters for noting that he did work with her in order to provide funding for the community development funding financial institutions. Then Congressman from Illinois, Bill Foster, started discussing all the problems that the economy is encountering due to the lack of the enhanced unemployment insurance payments, mainly the $600 a week enhanced unemployment benefit payments funded by the federal government through July 31st. He noted how top economists found that the lost $1 in lost enhanced unemployment insurance equates to $2 in lost value in GDP, in the gross domestic product. That's the monetary value of finished goods produced in a country during a specific period of time. It's the key metric that lawmakers and economists look to determine whether an economy is either expanding or it's contracting, whether we are on the right track. Then, of course, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that President Donald Trump signed an executive order mandating that states and the federal government fund a $400 a week boost up to people on unemployment insurance. Then later on, Congressman Bill Foster stated that he would talk about the problems with the executive order, and he thanked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin for going ahead and signing them. Nonetheless, that there are issues with it, and I'll tell you about that in a few moments. Then, Chairman of the Select Special Subcommittee handling the virus, Congressman James Clyburn, again, he attempted to reconcile the differences between the unemployment insurance numbers that he cited and the unemployment insurance numbers that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin cited. That there is a big gap, and indeed that the 27 million people that James Clyburn cited constitute the people that receive unemployment insurance under all the state programs, and the 14.5 million people that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin cited, they're just receiving regular state unemployment benefit payments. Then James Clyburn also told him that how can the administration not support sending more money out to state and local governments when the governor of his state, which is a Republican governor, has not fully opened its doors as yet. So this is not just a problem with blue states or northern states. There's a problem with blue states, northern states, red states, southern states. Every state is suffering an issue where they are encountering challenges to health, where they can't fully open their economy as of yet. So how can the administration not support more money for state and local governments? Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and he stated that together with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, together they conceded that indeed the administration had to support sending more money out to state and local governments. Nonetheless, the administration does not support dispersing $2.2 trillion as what the Democrats want, especially if they don't know what that $2.2 trillion is going to pay for. Then they stated that simply Democrat Senator Chuck Schumer, minority leader over at the Senate, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi simply had to come back to the table, and they could just basically come to an agreement, reach an agreement on provisions on which they both agree, and then make a deal and then come back for more funding if required, potentially next year if the president gets elected, of course, and he's still Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and not counting his millions somewhere in New York City or wherever it is he's going to live after he's gone from his public service. Then Congresswoman Maxine Waters contested the contention that the administration is posing, stating that states have all this money from the CARES Act. She's stating that states are actually using the money from the CARES Act in order to provide rental assistance to its residents, as what LA is doing at this particular moment in time, and that the administration has to work together with Nancy Pelosi and with Senator Chuck Schumer in order to pass a deal to get more rental assistance out to residents of these states. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that after the closing bell, after the trading stopped in stock market today, that the administration would announce specific guidelines as to how the administration planned to exercise executive authority in order to ensure that landlords could not evict people. So basically, the specific guideline mandated basically that the administration would use executive authority to block landlords from evicting individuals who make $98,000 or less, or couples that make $198,000 or less from getting evicted until the end of this year. Then, Congresswoman Maxine Waters told Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin to go ahead and call Nancy Pelosi right now if you have to, or after this hearing, to ensure that everyone gets back to the negotiating table and pass the next round of stimulus. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin told Congresswoman Maxine Waters that if she let him tell Speaker Pelosi that she told him to call her, that he would go ahead and call her, and if James Clyburn would allow it, and he was assuming and pretty sure that James Clyburn, the chairperson of this committee, would allow for them to get back to the negotiating table, he'd be willing to go back to the negotiating table right now to pass the next round of stimulus. Then Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin went on to say how he was working on legislation to ensure that the Small Business Administration made it easy to award forgiveness to borrowers of $10,000 to $20,000 Paycheck Protection Program loans, to essentially make that funding a grant. Then Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez from New York cited that the Federal Reserve found that a whopping 40% of Americans did not have $400 to deal with an unexpected emergency, how the Federal Reserve Main Street lending program only dispersed 14 loans amounting to $50 million. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that no, in fact, the Federal Reserve has dispersed $1 billion in loans through that program. He would look up the specific numbers, and he would send it out to Congresswoman Velasquez's office. Then, Democrat Congressman Bill Foster, again, he started questioning Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in regards to the effectiveness of the president's executive order. He asked him whether the president only appropriated $44 billion for the program. He stated that only 6 states, as I told you in today's early video, that only 6 states have stated that it will pay out funding, pay out the enhanced unemployment payments, the $300 a week boost up in federally funded enhanced unemployment payments this month. Those are the states of, as I told you before, Arizona, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, Tennessee, and Texas as of now, while 41 states have been approved. Then Treasury Secretary, shooting his own foot, stated that he thought that only about 26 states have signed up for the program, when both you and I know, I've drilled it in your brains enough time, I've etched it into your memory potentially, that 41 states have already been approved for the program. I won't go ahead and list them again. I listed them in the video that I uploaded this morning, but it's actually 41 states. So I'm pretty sure that you guys are qualified to go ahead and do his job if he needs replacement or he needs some support over at the White House, if that clarity will ensure that we get the $600 a week enhanced unemployment insurance payments, ladies and gentlemen. So Congressman Bill Foster also started discussing how Illinois wants to seek funding through the program. Nonetheless, there are administrative challenges that the state faces in order to implement this program. 55,000 people in the state who do not receive a minimum of $100 a week in regular state unemployment insurance payments will not qualify for the program. Also, well, just to be fair, as I told you in previous videos, FEMA, when it's dispersing the grants to states, it also dispersing 5% of the grant in addition to the grant in order to cover administration costs, so states can upgrade their systems to be able to pay out the $300 a week boost up enhanced unemployment benefits funded by the federal government. Then Congressman Bill Foster started listing the problems with the payroll, the payroll holiday, the payroll tax holiday that the president mandated through the executive order that he signed on August 8th. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin noted that it is basically just a deferral, that the president does not intend to exhaust Social Security funds in order to pay for this. It's a deferral as of right now. So basically, employers who choose to defer it, where you know there are major business leading groups that are representing over 30 industries, are calling for, are ensuring that its members, or basically wrote a letter to the president stating that its members would not go ahead and implement this payroll deferral, because then employees and employers would have to pay a lump sum tax bill next year. So he doesn't want that to happen. And Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that in fact that this money would have to be paid back, and then the administration is planning to go ahead and go to Congress and pass legislation to ensure that the funding that would absolve the debt that employees would have to pay at a lump sum next year would come from the general fund and not Social Security. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin also noted that he is the trustee to the Social Security fund, and that fund was not to be touched. Democrat Congressman from Maryland, James Raskin, asked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, how can the administration block funding to state and local governments when these entities would be using these funds to pay for the salaries of police officers, firefighters, other essential workers, just like Maxine Waters? When she posed her line of questioning, she asked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, how can the administration defund the police by blocking money that states will use in order to pay for police officers' salaries? Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that the Trump administration was against any more layoffs, and again, he just wanted to come to an agreement by enacting into law provisions on which both sides agree. He listed those agreements. He stated that both sides agree mainly on another round of stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment insurance, just not at the $600 per week level, another round of Paycheck Protection Program loans for businesses that can show a revenue loss due to economic disruptions, due to the pandemic, more money for schools, more money for the Postal Service. And then all parties can come back to the table to negotiate for another round of stimulus on top of the round that would cover provisions on which both sides agree right now. Then Congressman Raskin went on to say how states stand to suffer a $1 trillion revenue loss. I don't know where he got that number from. He didn't cite any sources. As I told you in today's early video, the Center on Budget Policies and Priorities found that states stand to suffer a $555 billion revenue loss. $555 billion revenue loss. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows stated that states stand to suffer a $275 billion loss. So there is a big agreement as to how much of a revenue shortfall states actually stand to suffer due to the pandemic. And I guess that's what's causing all these problems. He stated that his state stands to suffer a $2.6 billion loss this year and a $4 billion loss by 2022. He also stated that a whopping 1.5 million municipal jobs have been lost since the beginning of the pandemic, since February, and an additional 2.8 million jobs stand to be lost by next year, especially if states and local governments do not receive funding coming from the federal government through the next stimulus package, ladies and gentlemen. He stated that this number is already, the 1.5 million job losses already accounts for 2 times what the United States economy lost during the Great Recession. Former Federal Reserve chair people Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen told the House that when the government suffered job losses, municipal job losses during the Great Recession, that actually stifled economic growth. And the sitting Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell stated that municipal job losses will slow down the economic recovery. That said, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin kept echoing the same thing. Let's go ahead and pass everything on which we agree and then come back for more money next year. Assuming, of course, that the president gets reelected and he still has a title of Treasury Secretary, and he's not counting his millions somewhere in New York City where he's going to live after he ends his public service. Then, Congressman Andy Kim from New Jersey basically asked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin that if there are 30 to 40 million people that stand to get evicted, how can the $3.3 billion actually help these 30 million people at the conservative estimate? That will account for about $120 in rental assistance. Is that enough to help out people that stand to be evicted? First off, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that that figure is over-exaggerated because there are only 40 million rental units in the United States, and that people that are receiving enhanced unemployment insurance in some shape or form could use some of that money to go ahead and pay for their rent. Also, Congressman Kim noted that a whopping 5.6 million people have been stripped of their health care due to losing their jobs, and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin stated that that's why he supports another round of Paycheck Protection Program loans so businesses can keep their employees on payroll and keep workers attached to their health care sponsored by their employers. So it was pretty lengthy. I only heard the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program mentioned once by Nydia Velasquez when she was discussing the problems of the small business relief programs throughout the CARES Act that was dispersed through the CARES Act, ladies and gentlemen. Nonetheless, using this information, it has to go out so the American people can ensure to understand where everyone stands, where Democrats stand, where lawmakers stand, where Congress, the administration stands, and how we move forward in order to ensure that everybody is equipped with the monetary ammunition we need to save this country, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to keep calling for S.4227. I'm going to go ahead and cite an announcement that my man Jason Mack made the other day. You know that Senator Chuck Schumer, he went ahead and discussed providing more funding for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance Program. I'll go ahead and vlog more about that tomorrow, and we go ahead and line up another form of attack to go ahead and speak to these people, demand that lawmakers, public officials give us the tools we need in order to ensure our unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Watch this video right here for more stimulus, enhanced unemployment payment, and economic injury disaster loan coverage. Click the like button if you liked the video. Click the subscribe button to stay on top of my findings. As you know, we mobilize like no one else will, report when no one else will, and stop at nothing until each and every one of you is equipped with the monetary ammunition to save this country. May God bless you. May God bless the United States of America and everybody else on this planet. Talk soon.